Nobody expected me to show up at Dad's funeral. The looks on their faces said it all. But sometimes you have to face the past to move forward with your future. The letter came on a Tuesday morning. Plain white envelope with my name written in Dad's messy handwriting. No return address, just like him. I almost threw it away with all the other mail, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way my hand started shaking when I saw his writing. Inside was a funeral invitation. My father was gone. I sat there staring at the paper, waiting to feel something. Sadness, anger, shock. But all I felt was empty. It had been 10 long years since anyone from the Carter family had spoken to me. A whole decade since I packed up and left Atlanta with nothing but a broken heart and a baby boy. I remember that night clearly. Tommy was just 6 months old, crying in his car seat while I drove away from the only home I'd ever known. I had a black eye and a bag full of baby clothes. I'd finally found the courage to leave a marriage that was slowly destroying me. But when I showed up at Dad's door looking for help, he turned me away. "You made your choice," he said. "Now live with it." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. So I did live with it. I moved to Jacksonville and started over. Got a job at a bookstore, found a small apartment, learned how to be a single mom. It wasn't easy, but it was safe. Tommy and I built our own little world, just the two of us. We were happy. Even though Dad never called or visited, I still sent money every month. I asked Mrs. Henderson next door to deliver it so he wouldn't know it came from me. I never told Tommy about this. Some things are better kept private. Now here I was, holding this funeral invitation, wondering why he wanted me there after all these years. Tommy must have noticed my expression because he came over and sat beside me. "Are you going to go?" he asked quietly. I couldn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. Finally, he added, "Maybe there's something he wanted to tell you, Mom. Maybe this is your chance to say goodbye properly." Looking at my son, my brave, wise 15-year-old boy, I knew he was right. Whatever waited for me back in Atlanta, I needed to face it. So I folded the letter, booked 2 plane tickets, and prepared to return to a place I swore I'd never see again. The church was smaller than I remembered. Old wooden pews, stained glass windows, the smell of old flowers and furniture polish. Walking through those doors felt like stepping back in time. Tommy held my hand as we made our way down the aisle. People turned to stare. Whispers started immediately. There they were in the front row. My brother Jake and sister Emma, dressed in expensive black clothes, looking like they were attending a business meeting instead of their father's funeral. Emma saw me first. Her eyes went wide with surprise, then narrowed with something that looked like anger. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. I guess she heard there might be money involved. Jake laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Some people have no shame," he muttered. I didn't respond. I just kept walking until I found a seat in the back row. I hadn't come to fight. I'd come to pay my respects and maybe find some peace. Tommy squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let them get to you, Mom." The service began. Prayers, hymns, and speeches about what a great man my father was. They talked about his business success, his community involvement, his dedication to family. They mentioned Jake's achievements and Emma's charity work. But not once did anyone say my name. It was like I had never existed. Tommy leaned against my shoulder, quiet and strong. I wasn't crying, not because I didn't want to, but because I'd done all my crying years ago. When the service ended, people filed out past us. A few distant relatives nodded politely, but most pretended not to see me. Emma brushed past without a glance. Jake stopped just long enough to lean down and whisper, "You shouldn't have come. This isn't your family anymore." Then he was gone, leaving me sitting in that empty church with my son. But I wasn't there to rejoin the family. I was there to close a chapter that had been left unfinished for too long. The family house looked exactly the same. Big white columns, red brick walls, perfectly manicured lawn. But walking through the front door felt like entering a freezer. Cold, unwelcoming, full of people who wished I wasn't there. The living room was crowded with relatives, neighbors, and family friends. They all seemed to be having a good time, eating, drinking, and sharing stories. When they saw me enter with Tommy, the conversations got quieter. I could feel their stares like needles on my skin. Emma stood by the fireplace with a glass of wine, looking more like a hostess at a party than a daughter at her father's funeral. Jake was beside her, also drinking, both of them watching me with cold eyes. "This won't take long," Jake announced to the room. "She was cut out of the will years ago." A few people laughed uncomfortably. Others suddenly became very interested in the family photos on the walls. I kept my coat on even though the room was warm. Tommy stayed close to me, his hand in mine. We found chairs in the back corner, away from the crowd. I looked around at all the family pictures covering the walls. Emma in her wedding dress, Jake with his college diploma, vacation photos from fancy trips. Not a single picture of me, not even from when we were kids. I'd been erased completely. Emma caught me looking and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind that says, "You don't belong here." She walked over and said sweetly, "You can stay if you want, Rachel, but don't expect anything. This isn't your story anymore." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. But Tommy looked up at me with such focus, like he was waiting for something important to happen. Somehow, I knew he was right to wait. The room went quiet when the front door opened. Mr. Wilson, Dad's lawyer, walked in carrying his briefcase and a small wooden box. He looked like a man who knew exactly what kind of situation he was walking into. Emma barely looked up from her wine. Jake checked his watch like he had somewhere important to be. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Wilson said in his deep, professional voice. "Before we read the will, Mr. Carter left specific instructions that we watch a video message first." The mood in the room changed instantly. Emma looked annoyed. "A video? Can't we just get to the important part? We all know what the will says." Jake nodded. "Yeah, let's not drag this out. Some of us have flights to catch." But Mr. Wilson didn't budge. He set up a laptop on the coffee table and opened the wooden box. "Your father was very clear about this. The video must be shown before anything else." Emma rolled her eyes. Jake mumbled something under his breath. But everyone gathered around, curious despite themselves. I stayed in my chair, but Tommy sat up straighter beside me. His grip on my hand loosened slightly, and when I looked at him, his face was bright with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. For the first time since entering that house, I didn't feel completely alone. The screen flickered and then there he was. My father, looking older and thinner than I remembered. His shoulders, once so straight and proud, now seemed bent under some invisible weight. His eyes, always so sharp and cold, looked tired and sad. He was sitting at his old desk, the same one that used to be off-limits to us kids. "If Rachel is watching this," he began, his voice rough and quiet, "I owe her an apology I should have given years ago." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "I was wrong," he continued. "I judged you for leaving a marriage I didn't understand. I thought you were weak. I thought you were being selfish. I believed what I wanted to believe because it was easier than asking the hard questions." His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, something I'd never seen before. "When you came to my door that night, hurt and scared, carrying your baby, I should have opened my arms. I should have said, 'You're safe now.' But I didn't. I let my pride speak louder than my love. A lump formed in my throat. Tommy reached for my hand again, his fingers warm and strong. I told myself I was teaching you responsibility. But the truth is, I was punishing you for being braver than I ever taught you to be. For choosing yourself and your child over a situation that was destroying you. Behind me, I could hear people shifting in their chairs, someone breathing heavily. But I couldn't look away from the screen. I found out the truth, Rachel. A few years ago, Mrs. Henderson told me about the monthly envelopes. The money you sent to help with my bills. Even when I gave you nothing, even when I pretended you didn't exist, you never stopped caring. You never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father. My breath caught. Tears started falling before I could stop them. I watched you from a distance, he said. Mrs. Henderson told me how well you were doing. About the bookstore, about Tommy. She said he's a smart boy, that he looks at the world with kindness, just like you do. He smiled then, small and sad. That broke my heart because I realized what I'd missed. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Rachel. But if I can leave you with anything, let it be this: I was wrong. You were right. You did what I should have taught you to do. You protected your child. You walked away from pain. And you built something beautiful. He took a shaky breath. I don't want to be remembered as the father who abandoned his daughter. So I've changed my will. They don't know yet, but they will. Gasps echoed around the room. Someone cursed. Emma sat up straight. Jake's face went red. All I ever wanted was to be proud of my children, Dad said. And I am proud of you. Of the woman you became when I wasn't looking. Tell Tommy thank you for giving me one last chance to be a grandfather, even from far away. The screen went black. Complete silence filled the room. But for the first time in 10 years, I heard my father loud and clear. Mr. Wilson didn't wait for the shock to wear off. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The video was meant to explain the changes, he said calmly. Now I'll read the revised will, which was properly witnessed and legally filed 2 years ago. Emma gripped her wine glass. Jake crossed his arms, still looking smug like the video meant nothing. To my daughter Rachel Marie Carter, Wilson began, I leave the family home, all its contents, and the surrounding property. The room exploded. Heads turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. My hands were frozen in my lap, Tommy's small hand still tucked in mine. Additionally, Wilson continued, I leave to Rachel Carter the sum of $300,000 in savings and investments. And to her son, Tommy Carter, I leave a college fund worth $150,000. My heart stopped. Tommy blinked up at me, his mouth open, trying to understand what those numbers meant. I was trying to understand too. Wilson turned the page. To my son Jake and daughter Emma, I leave my collection of family photographs, my military medals, and the family Bible. Emma shot to her feet. What? Her voice cracked. That's impossible. There has to be a mistake. There's no mistake, Wilson said calmly. Your father changed his will 2 years ago. Everything is legal and properly documented. Jake stood up too, his face dark with anger. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, Wilson replied, closing the folder. He also asked me to read this note aloud. He pulled out a handwritten piece of paper. Let them remember who showed up when it mattered. Let them remember who stayed quiet but never stopped loving. This house should belong to the person who never asked for anything but gave everything anyway. Emma stormed out. Jake followed, slamming the door behind him. One by one, the other relatives slipped away, avoiding eye contact, embarrassed and ashamed. I didn't move. Not because I was in shock, but because for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel erased. I felt chosen. The house was quiet now. Not the angry, tense quiet from before, but peaceful. Calm. I stood up slowly and walked to Dad's old reading chair by the window. It was still there, worn leather cracked at the arms, shaped by years of use. I touched the top gently and whispered, "Goodbye, Dad. I forgive you." The words came easily. They didn't hurt or burn. They just settled into place like they'd been waiting for the right moment. Tommy didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The fireplace crackled softly, casting warm light around the room. For the first time in years, this house didn't feel like a place that had rejected me. It felt like a home that had finally welcomed me back. Maybe some hurts don't disappear. Maybe they just wait for the right words, the right moment, the right person to say, "I'm sorry," and "I love you." And finally, after all these years, I had heard both. 2 months later, the house feels different. Not haunted or heavy, but alive again. Tommy has turned the sunroom into his art studio. Every morning I find him there, drawing and painting, his laughter echoing through halls that used to feel so cold. Yesterday, a letter came from Mrs. Henderson. She wrote, "The day your father realized you were the one sending money, I saw him cry for the first time in 20 years. He carried that knowledge with him until the end, and it changed him." I folded the letter and stepped onto the front porch. Tommy was sitting on the steps, sketchbook in his lap, drawing the oak trees in our yard. I looked out over the lawn, the flowers, the peaceful street. "He saw me in the end," I said to the wind. "The daughter they tried to erase was here all along. She was just waiting for love to find its way home."